So in my last video, I said I was going to pick up with where we left off in the book of Ether, but I was just reviewing chapter 10, which is where we are at in the book of Ether. And this one chapter covers something like 1,000 years of history. It glosses over 10, 15 generations, takes us almost down to the captivity. So I've decided not to read chapter 10 yet. I'm going to read chapter 10 of Ether. We'll go back to chapter 10 of Ether. Probably do chapter 10 and chapter 11 after we read Judges and just before we start with the reign of the kings. Because those two chapters together take us from the Exodus, from the time period of the Exodus to just after the captivity, which is a period of about 1,000 years. Those two chapters together are about 1,000 years. So, but I do want to line up our timeline in a brief video here. So let's look at the timeline here. All right, so we have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Matching these three generations is Jared, Orihah, and Kib. These are the first three kings. Jared, and then Orihah, the first king, and Kib, the second king of the Jaredites. From there, we get Judah, Pharez, Ram, Aminadab, Nahshon, Salmon, Boaz. Now this takes us into the time of the Judges. Boaz is one of the first guys right in the beginning of the Judges. This is where we left off in Ether. After Kib, we had Shul, Omer, during which time was Achish and the first secret combinations that almost destroyed Israel, almost destroyed the Jaredites. This is while Israel is in Egypt. Then we had Emer, Coriantum, Com, and Heth. Heth would be one generation before Boaz. That's what we've read to so far. This is the generations. The exact years in Ether, we don't know. The only time we are given any exact dates is with the King Coriantum. And we are told that he was 142 when he died. Now, he would have been at the same time, would have been living at the same time as the Egyptian, as when Israel was in Egypt. And we know, for instance, Levi, the son of Jacob, lived 137 years. Kohath lived 130, and Amram lived another 137. So this age range of 142 years matches with the general or average age of people during this time of the Egyptian captivity. Lines up very beautifully. Now, after Heth, which is where we left off in Ether, we get this long line of kings. Usually the son of, the next son. There are two times where it is just the ancestor or the descendant of. So we may skip a generation, but we can line it up to the kings of Israel, or the kings of Judah, really. David, or going from Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David, Solomon, Rehoboam, Abijah, and on down the line. And if we line up these two genealogy lists, generation to generation, Ether was the last prophet of the Jaredites during the time that Coriantumr is king. Now, Coriantumr is not a descendant of Jared. He's not in the royal line. He's likely somewhere a descendant of Jared because they were likely intermingled, but he's not of the royal descent. He is of a usurper. And Ether would be the rightful king if you had followed the royal descent of Orihah. But Ether and Coriantumr, that period, is during the captivity in Babylon. Remember, Israel was in captivity for 70 years, from the year 600 to the year 530. In the year 530, the Persians allow them to come back, and we get the books of Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. Ether would have been during that 70 years, probably close to the end of that 70 years. So the destruction of the Jaredites will line up to the time period of Ezra and Nehemiah. Now, again, chapters 10 and 11 of Ether take us from the Exodus to the time of Ezra. So I'm going to continue reading in the Bible. We will read the books of Moses, Joshua, Judges, and Ruth. And then we will return to Ether, and we will read chapters 10 and 11, at which point we will return to the Old Testament, where we will have to calculate what books come next, because it's going to get very confusing. But just wanted to make this comment before I started reading, because I did say I would start in Ether next, but I have decided to switch over to Leviticus. So anyway, see you in the next one. So having just made that video about how I'm not going to read in Ether, I have to correct myself. I made that decision thinking it's better to read a full chapter at a time, right? And usually it is. But considering how much time takes place within chapter 10 of Ether, I think I'm actually going to read it in 3 different videos covering 3 different time periods. And so I will include a video of Ether, but it will only be through the time of David. So it'll take us to about the beginning of the book of 1 Samuel, approximately. And so I'm going to read as we line up our generations. You can see that David and Morianton are approximately the same generation. And so we will read down to the end of the story of Morianton. And that is where we will leave off. And then we will return to the book of Ether and read, well, we may read the rest of the chapter, but we'll return to it after we get to the book of 1 Samuel, after the time of the judges. So anyways, sorry for the confusion, but that's how we're going to go.